The responsibility to protect was reflected in the 2005 outcome document of the General Assembly, where leaders of the world accepted the responsibility to protect their own populations against genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing. I must say that the principle of responsibility to protect is not entirely new. The UN Charter itself was born of the spirit of responsibility to protect, given that there's a provision that it was intended to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. So actually you cannot understand the UN Charter without an understanding of the responsibility to protect as well. The only difference is that whereas the Charter emphasized interstate conflict, we realized that when the civil wars intensified in many parts of the world, including what we saw in Rwanda and Liberia and so on, the world community was hesitant to intervene because they thought this was internal matters under Article 2.7. So in my view, the principle of responsibility to protect is intended to also check the abuse of the principle of non-interference. In fact, in Africa, we even have enshrined the principle in some form in Article 4 of the Constitutive Act and many other instruments, including those adopted by the ECOWAS region in West Africa. And that is to say, we are stressing that whereas we recognize the principle of non-interference that is based on sovereignty and independence, the principle of responsibility to protect is intended to also emphasize the principle of non-indifference, and as well as emphasizing our interdependence. So we have on the one hand the principle of non-interference and independence, and also the principle of non-indifference and interdependence. So this is where we have to lend our support to the responsibility to protect, because it is intended to ensure that when there's another Rwanda or Srebrenica, the international community will not spend time debating whether or not to intervene because it's an internal matter, but they would have agreed already that in such situations, when they do occur again, we would intervene. And I must conclude by also recalling that even in the UN, the responsibility to protect is not entirely new in the General Assembly, because in the days of the apartheid regime, there was a debate between those who thought that the international community could not interfere with the apartheid system and stop it because it was an internal matter, and those who thought that in cases of egregious violations of human rights, you cannot rely on the principle of non-interference. And so the General Assembly promoted various conventions which declared apartheid a crime against humanity, and placed a responsibility on the international community, a primary responsibility or a principal responsibility to assist such countries facing situations like apartheid to break free from it. So in actual fact, even in some way, one would say that the responsibility to protect even reduced a little bit the standard that was set by the General Assembly in the conventions on apartheid, because under the conventions on apartheid, the General Assembly said the international community's responsibility was primary or principal. But in the case of the responsibility to protect, we simply say that the primary responsibility is on the state itself to protect its people, and it is when it fails or is unable to do so or unwilling to do so, that's where the international community comes in. But as you know, we have three pillars: prevention, assistance, and intervention when necessary. So thank you very much.